seems they feel that they've done all they can to help, with Peter Falding saying, wherever she is, I hope closure comes soon. We also know that the police diving teams have been out here in the river today, but like the SGI team, they unfortunately have been unable to find any answers that may tell us where NICOLA BULLEY has gone.
And Peter Falding indicating that one of the issues is that at that spot, the water is really shallow, I think only about 3 feet deep. So therefore, this is the difficulty, trying to work out how or where she might have gone into the river and then been taken away by the tidal surge.
So that is a very good point, is the area where NICOLA BULLEY apparently fell into the water, supposedly fell into the water, is only 3 feet deep. There are rocks underfoot, but it's a kind of a question, how on earth do you drown in 3 feet of water? It's not impossible. And so one of the theories is that she may have fallen in, hit her head, and then she was taken away, right? So for those of you unfamiliar with me, unfamiliar with this channel, my name is Nick van der Leek, and I'm the author of many books on true crime. I've also covered at least 2 British missing person cases. Nora Corrin, I wrote a book about that. And then also I've written a couple of trilogies on the Madeleine McCann case. In America, I've written about Gannon Stork, which is a fairly recent case. And then I also covered the Kylie Rodney case on YouTube. I would say I was one of the only YouTubers who correctly assessed that case, certainly in terms of what was eventually discovered. So we want to apply what we know. We want to apply our knowledge in all of these cases to this particular case. And so one of the things we want to do is maintain the scout mindset, right? In other words, we want to stay curious. At this point, we want to get as much information as we can get. And also, we want to remain open-minded. So at the same time, and I'm going to play you some footage because we're going to try and I have prepared a script, but we want to get up to date on the latest news. We want to be open-minded to the possibility of an accident, right? We want to stay open-minded to that possibility, right? But at the same time that we're open-minded to the possibility of an accident, we're also open-minded to other possibilities. You're going to hear someone say that there's no evidence. In terms of the Ring doorbell cameras, CCTV, it doesn't look like NICOLA BULLEY left that area, right? That's how it appears. So by the same token that you stay open-minded that it could be an accident, I think you also need to be aware of the possibilities that there could be foul play. And now that we are 12 days out, it could even be 13 now. We're almost 2 weeks after the incident, and NICOLA BULLEY, 45-year-old NICOLA BULLEY, still missing. Each day that goes by, that pendulum shifts towards foul play, right? And so we've got to be, in the same way, we must be open-minded within an accident scenario that foul play is possible. In the same way, if we, let's say, biased or to some extent starting to feel that foul play is likely, we must also be open-minded to the possibility of an accident. If you haven't voted in the poll, please do.
Hey, what's that?
This is After Effects, a new accessible.
I see about half of you feel that it's not an accident. 47%, 16%, which is very few, think that it's likely to be an accident. And then 32% say, I don't know. And I think that's right now a very good answer. I don't know, I think is a very good answer. So we're going to basically go through the motions in terms of the old true crime formula. We're going to try and get to know NICOLA. We're going to try and get to know her partner. We're going to look at a video of him, and we're going to kind of analyze that. We're going to try and get to know the terrain, which reminds me a little bit of the Delphi case. Going into sort of a park, there's a river, and then what actually happened in that situation. And then we're going to start thinking about possibilities. Okay, so I want to go a little bit earlier to the beginning of this clip, just to give you a sense of where we are. This came out earlier today. Can you see in the headline that says, police reject suggestions that she could have been a victim of a crime? So in my opinion, that is not the right attitude to take. I think what they should be saying is, at this point, we are open to all possibilities. That's what I think that would be the right line, because now they've got to constantly defend that mindset. They've got to constantly be in a soldier mindset she couldn't have been a victim of a crime, right? And we've just had the equivalent of AWP, a specialized search team, go there, and he's just finished 3 days worth of searching, didn't find anything, and he says he's really baffled by it, right? So they've searched and they haven't found anything. So is she still in the area, or was she taken out of the area? Or did she leave the area of her own volition? Did she sort of run away from home, kind of thing? So let's start gathering information.
I understand that Paul Ansell, her partner, has visited the scene there, where, of course, they're still trying to ascertain the sonar picture, if you like, of the river there. So
this should be familiar territory to those who covered the Kylie Rodney case with me. It's a water-based search. It seems as though her phone was left at a bench at the water's edge, quite a steep edge. There's no evidence of skidding or grabbing on the grass at the verge. No blood, no evidence whatsoever, except her phone at a bench right at the water's edge. Now, was that planted there, or did she leave it there? Right. What is the other thing I wanted to mention regarding this? So it reminds one to some extent of the whole Kylie Rodney thing and AWP and the sonar search. But the thing that's different here is the water's only 3 feet deep. You don't need to be sort of an absolute expert to search this sort of terrain. You would expect, if there's a body lying there, you would expect it to be found. The other thing that makes this case somewhat different to the Kylie Rodney case is you're talking about a tidal river. It's the River Wire, and that's a tidal river. And so there is the possibility that she was swept out to sea. We're going to look at some maps in a moment, but that also, if she was swept out to sea, why did she not wash up as well?
He has indeed been here this morning. He visited the site where police originally believed NICOLA originally went missing from, here at the River Wire in St Michael's on Wire in Lancashire. We also know that he spoke with the founder of SGI, who for the last 3 days...
So she's referring to the partner of Paula Bulley, sorry, she's referring to the partner of NICOLA Bulley, and that is Paul Ansell. And Paul is 45 years old. He's an engineer. He is been with her for 12 years. I'm not sure whether they have children together, but there are 2 girls that are part of the family. And NICOLA dropped her 2 girls off at school and then went for a walk with a dog. I don't know if you can see the dog behind me. That's her dog in the picture. And so there's also a dog narrative here where she was taking the dog for a walk. The dog was found without a leash, which isn't unusual for her. But the part that was unusual was that the dog didn't seem distressed and the dog wasn't wet. For example, if the owner had fallen in the water. If I'd fallen in the water, I know my dog would have come after me. I've been in a river situation before, and he swims out to me even though he doesn't like the water. And then the other thing is that the harness, so that the leash wasn't on, which was normal, but the thing that was a little bit abnormal was that the harness wasn't on. And so that certainly makes one wonder how that could have happened. Could the dog have gotten into the water and then somehow, anyway, so the harness isn't on the dog.
Have been carrying out an independent search of the rivers. When he spoke with Peter Faulding, the founder of SGI, we believe that he spoke with Paul about exactly what their investigation has entailed thus far. I mentioned there that it's the...
So can you see how just in that image, you are dealing with a totally different situation to Kylie Rodney, in the sense that it's not a wide expanse of water. You basically go over a narrow corridor, and if you're scanning there, well, you're either going to find something or you're not. So in other words, it's not like you might miss something to the left or miss something to the right. If you go, it's like going over like a road. If you go over that, and it's shallow water as well, you just basically follow the corridor of the river, and you probably going to, if something is there, you're going to find it. It's not as though there's this great expanse, right? And there are so many possibilities. So in terms of an accidental scenario, there's so many possibilities for a body to snare on, because they're sort of corners going like this. There are there's grass, there are bushes, there are rocks, there are shallower areas as well. And because the water is fluctuating, there are many areas where you would expect detritus to collect, if I can put it that way.
The third day that SGI have been helping Lancashire Police in their search for Nicola Bulley, but we heard a little bit earlier on that today will actually be the last day that SGI will be helping with that search. It seems they feel that they've done all they can to help, with Peter Faulding saying wherever she is.
So there you can get a sense of, you know, and obviously you want to search during the low tidal phase, but there you can get a sense of just how shallow it is, right? Okay, so now I want to take you guys to what the law enforcement position is, right, from their own sort of version. And this is what they say.
The inquiry team has undertaken a number, as I said, of dash cam, CCTV and ring doorbell footages. This has allowed us to eliminate any trace so far of Nicola having left the riverside, which is really important. So we believe that Nicola was in the riverside area and remained in the riverside area. We remain open to any inquiries that might lead us to question that. But at this time, we understand that she was by the river. Our main working hypothesis, therefore, is that Nicola has sadly fallen into the river, that there is no third party or criminal involvement, and that this is not suspicious, but a tragic case of a missing person. This is particularly important because speculation otherwise can be really distressing for the family and for Nicola's children.
So I think that is a very good way to introduce this story, is that is the position of law enforcement, and we need to respect it. They are holding a lot more cards than I guess we are. And we take a leaf out of their book, and their leaf is to say, there's absolutely no sign of criminal activity. And I think we had a similar statements in the Kylie Rodney case, right? No signs of foul play, and we know how that ended. We dealing with a similar situation here. They just cannot find Nicola Bulley. And while this is a developing story, while I'm doing this broadcast, it's possible that they might find her. It's possible they might find her an hour from now, and it's possible they might find her tomorrow, or possibly a week from now. right? That possibility certainly exists. But where we are now, there's been extensive searches. I think they've used drones, dogs, boats, air searches, ground searches, water searches, and it's sort of the same situation as in the Kylie Rodney case. They simply cannot find this person. And the difference is there's not a vehicle that took her away. We know where a vehicle is. Her vehicle is still parked where she dropped the girls off. And we're going to look at the route that she took in a moment. But each day that goes by, the pendulum swings slightly away from accident to foul play. And it's because you would expect someone who innocently falls that nature will sort of reveal them sooner or later. And nature wouldn't easily hide someone in a situation like this. And I think one's got to test that as well. I think one can place some kind of flotation device during the same tidal circumstances as when NICOLA disappeared and see, was the tide coming in or was the tide going out? And then see what route it takes, how quickly it takes that route, and then see what we're dealing with, right? Okay, so for me, one of the big questions I had, and I'm not quite sure why it wasn't sort of established more clearly, but one of the questions I had right in the beginning is, can NICOLA swim, right? It's a question I also had in the Summer Wells case. By the way, that's a case that is still a missing persons case, Summer Wells. So there's a case where someone disappeared and still missing, right? More than a year later. So, and also that case involved water. So the answer to the question is that Summer Wells couldn't swim. NICOLA BULLEY could. She could swim. So that already starts to create a bit of a problem. Even if you take away the 3 feet of water, the fact that she could swim, I mean, to fall into the water where she did, so why would you not just get out again, right? Part of the answer, you could say, well, it was quite steep over there, but then just a little bit further away, it wasn't as steep. So what's the issue? And then there are all sorts of other problems as well. If she fell into the water and she was struggling to get out and it was only 3 feet deep, well, you stand on your knees and you scream and you shout, help, right? And then the dog, you can see the dog in the background there. Why, if she did fall into the water, why was the dog not in the water? Or why was the dog still in that area? How come the dog stayed in that area? And I think that's actually a very important clue. The dog was really the last witness to all this. So why did the dog stay in that area? Also, why was the harness taken off the dog? Who took the harness off the dog? So it was apparently quite normal for her to walk with a dog, as I do. When I walk with my dog, he's often off leash, and lately I've been walking him without a harness as well. But the harness was there, it was just taken off. Okay, so I just want to see if I can show you here. So there's her husband, sorry, there's her partner, 12-year partner. I think there is an ex-husband in the story. His name is Paul Ansell. And you can see there, he said it was impossible to comprehend what had happened to her, adding that he was trying to stay strong for the couple's daughters. And then he made the statement, every single scenario comes to a brick wall, every single one of them. So we will do a little bit of statement analysis there in a moment. I'm just trying to, there you see, they add that Bully is able to swim. Can you see that? Okay. So in terms of Sky News's coverage, NICOLA BULLEY specialist team pulls out of the search, as expert says, she's categorically not in the section of river. Now, we remember in the Kylie Rodney case, you kind of had the same situation. They said, law enforcement said, she's definitely not in the reservoir, and it turned out she was. So we've got to be open to the possibility that, first of all, she might still be in the river. Secondly, she may have washed out to sea. It's a very remote possibility, but it's possible. And I think in terms of that, one's got to look at the weather. One's got to look at, was there an unusual amount of rainfall subsequent to January 27th? And I have looked at the weather. I have looked at the temperature. The temperature was slightly lower than usual. To be honest, I haven't been able to find weather history in terms of precipitation. So we still nevertheless want to look at the river and just get a sense of that. And obviously, when you come to this point, as we did in the Kylie Rodney case, if you start saying, we've searched this water area thoroughly, and we can now draw a line through it, she's not in the water. And bear in mind, searching water is quite tricky. It's definitely trickier than on land. Water levels fluctuate. You think you can see through water, but maybe you can't. Could there be another possibility that she didn't fall in that particular area, but she's just a bit further down? Remember in the Kylie Rodney case, they searched at the boat ramp area, and that's where they focused their search. Maybe the problem here is that they're focusing their search around the bench, and they need to go a couple of meters up and a couple of meters the other way. Anyway, we will look at those possibilities in a bit more detail. So that's where we are now. You've had these specialist search teams saying we cannot find her. And that's when you also start thinking of other scenarios. Could she have left voluntarily with someone that she knows? Could she have pulled on maybe a disguise or a wig, or changed her clothing? Was this done on purpose? You wouldn't think so as a mother of two, that she left voluntarily, that this was sort of part of, you wouldn't think so. I guess it's possible. You wouldn't think so. Also leaving her dog, you wouldn't think she would do that as well. Then I think the next scenario is, did somebody take her from the scene? And I do think that scenario is fairly plausible, because she was a regular dog walker, and we're gonna investigate that area. So the fact is, she often walked her dog, right? And so if someone, and she's quite an attractive lady, if someone wanted to do something to her, then I think there was a pattern of behavior where they could have anticipated her movements and premeditated something, right? And I think that applies to an unknown third party. And I think that unfortunately may also apply to people who know her, and I think that also applies potentially to her partner, right? It also could be that her partner or some other person asked somebody else to do something who didn't know her, but that person informed this person of her movements. I'm just saying, the fact that she had a pattern of visiting this particular spot means that if there was foul play, someone could gain the advantage, in the sense that they could park a car in a certain spot, as we saw in the Delphi case, and sort of enter and leave that area, perhaps in a way that you wouldn't easily be able to track, unlike Brian Koberger in the Idaho case. So maybe there is a route to that park where there are not CCTV cameras. Is it possible? Is it possible? Okay. So that's her. As you can see, she's quite an attractive lady. And does that play a role? Did someone see her often? Someone who encountered her, someone who walked in that park as well, encountered her and found her attractive, and came up with some some scheme. Is there a custody aspect in this case? Okay. So over here it says the main working hypothesis is that she fell into the river. But the problem is there's no evidence that she fell into the river. There's also no evidence of foul play, but there's no skidding marks, there's no blood on the rocks, there's no grass that's been sort of yanked, there's no, and it's possible that she may have been pushed into the river, or that she just fell into the river and bumped her head, and then maybe you wouldn't see any evidence. But I think something else that was said was the clothing she wore that day would take a while to sort of fill up with water. The clothing itself was sort of would tend to float, so that's kind of another problem. So Specialist Group International, SGI, is a little bit like AWP. And there's the leader of the search group, and he says he's baffled by all of this. Yeah, you have the same thing, side scans, sonar, etc. He says, my personal view is that I think it's a long way to go in a tidal river. That's a reference to the possibility of her being washed out to sea. He says it's a really long way to go in a tidal river. I was actually in tidal rivers a couple of weeks ago paddling with my dog, and my father's got a farm with a very steep embankment as well, where you've got to sort of kind of slide into the river. So I have a little bit of experience with that and with those sort of difficulties. Another possibility is that she was sitting on that bench and she had some kind of medical thing. She may have had an epileptic seizure. She may have had a heart attack, and standing there, she then fell into the water. And then she wouldn't have screamed. That could be an innocent possibility. But in a foul play scenario, if you're saying, well, it must be foul play, well, then why didn't she scream in that situation, right, as well? Also, how would you get her out of the area in a foul play situation if there's the public around you? How would you get in and out, taking someone by force without being seen? It is. I'm trying to remember the name of that case that involved a young woman who was walking, I think through London. I can't quite remember where she was walking, but a police officer basically forced her into his vehicle and then took her away. Can anyone remember that case? I'm just trying to remember the name of that case. But that's a case where someone was basically taken sort of in, not, it happened at night, but in kind of a public setting that you maybe would not have expected. Sarah Everard, that's it. So could there be a Sarah Everard type situation here where someone approached NICOLA and secretly held a gun to her and or whatever, and could there be a situation like that? Also, could it be someone who's local to the area? Could they have a house just right bordering on the area, and have police done a door-to-door search? There's also a caravan park very close to this area. Bria, good to have you here. Jim says, I don't think she was ever at the river and the partner staged the whole thing. Well, the problem with that is we know that she was at the river. There were witnesses, her dog's there, and her phone's there. So, but yeah, could the whole thing have been staged? What you really want to look at is the very last footage we have of her. That's quite important. but apparently a witness saw her. We're going to deal with where that happened. I just want to quickly go through the last couple of stories here, and then we're going to deal with the script that I prepared. So Peter Faulding, he's just been talking about his experience, and he's just been saying how baffled he is by the search. And what's quite interesting is he has in the past disagreed with the police where they thought something was an accident and he thought it was foul play, right? That's to do with the Williams case. And so in this case, he's saying, I'm just trying to see. So there you can see evidence of a search, air search. And there you can kind of get the sense that it's a very similar fabric to the Kylie Rodney case. They're checking for sonar. The difference is it's a much more restricted area where you go. You just go, you follow the river. It's not very wide. And you're either going to see something there or you're not. And so one of the things he says is, was the phone on the bench a decoy left by a third party? And so there you kind of get an idea that although the sort of ribbon of the river isn't that hard to search, you just basically go forward, right? It is 5 miles long, right? It's oh, sorry, that's a different case. Sorry, that's a different case. That's a River Trent. Okay. I actually don't know the length of this river, but I think it's a labyrinth that keeps going all the way to the sea. We're going to look at a map of it in a moment. Does anyone here know the length of the River Wire? Does anyone know what the actual search length is? So 5 things forensics experts claims don't add up about the dog walker's disappearance. It's quite interesting that they're looking at the demeanor of the dog. Why was the dog so calm? Why was the dog so calm? So let's have a look at some of there's the dog, right? So some of the things they're saying is her mobile phone was left on the bench. So that's the other thing I find a bit strange is if she fell into the water, why wouldn't she have her phone on her? Do you know what I mean? The phone does seem kind of decoyish. Why on earth would she not be holding the phone when she fell into the water? And if she had her phone on her and then she stood up, what made her stand up? Could it have been the dog? Could she have been sort of running after the dog to deal with something? So here you have it. Faulding has suggested the phone could have been left as a decoy. Obviously, that's a foul play type scenario, right? Could there be staging in this case? Then they talk about the behavior of the dog. The dog was bone dry. If the dog didn't enter the river, does that mean she didn't enter the river? And there again, you get a sense of this search area. Now, suppose you could make the same argument as with the Kylie Rodney case. You could say that river's not that narrow. So you might think, well, I would just go once up the stretch, and then what's the word? You just go once up that stretch, and then I've searched it. But maybe you need two. What's the word? Two passes. Certainly in this little section, at least 2 passes. So I suppose that's that's a possibility where you could have human error. Okay, no screams were heard. That to me, I think is the most baffling thing, is if she fell, if it was an accident, she fell into the river, then why didn't she scream? Equally, if there was foul play involved, why didn't she scream? All of this happened in a public space, so there were other people walking around. So that does make it quite baffling. These are some of the last images of her. Let's just do that. And you can see that is how she was dressed. She was dressed warmly. I think it was 7 degrees Celsius that morning. She had her hair in a ponytail. She is quite an attractive woman, so it does make you wonder, did that catch someone's attention? Was that is that a factor in the story? Then another problem is that the scene was not closed to the public. So, by the way, this bench that you're seeing here, this is exactly where it happened. You can see how steep it is over here. But is the bench and the phone supposed to imply something? Did she normally sit on this bench? Also, her phone was apparently, I want to give the right information, but as far as I know, her phone was logged into Teams. Her phone was on. She was logged into Teams, but the audio and I think video was off. Like she was, what's the word? She was listening in, I guess you could say, which suggests either that she, until the last second, she was almost like working remotely, I guess, or she was a mortgage advisor, well, let's say is a mortgage advisor, or that someone who knew her very well was able to get her to do that with her phone. That's another possibility. But again, yeah, you can see the river is actually fairly wide over here. So could there be an area very close to the spot, as we had in the Kylie Rodney case, which is literally they were looking in the wrong spot. Just around the corner was actually where something happened. Could she have fallen in just a few feet that way or a few feet that way? You would imagine that they wouldn't make a rookie mistake like that, but who knows? And then so far, no body has been found. They say the downstream and upstream river. So you might say, you know what the mistake they've been making? It's a tidal river. And the mistake they've been making is they've just looked downstream. They've just searched between this point and the sea. What about upstream? Well, they have tried to do that. They've tried to search upstream as well. And so the forensic team are baffled. So there you get another sense of the idiosyncrasy of the, let's call it the crime scene, or the scenario that we're dealing with is, in some stretches the river is wider, and in other sections it's narrower, and so there's fluctuations. So we're not dealing with a symmetrical, it's not like a room in a house like in the Idaho case, so many rooms in a limited crime scene. This is like kind of limitless potentially, and that kind of makes it a lot harder. So you also want to know, what is the normal situation? Like if a car goes into water, what's the normal situation? Well, the back end floats up. The victim will tend to follow the air pocket, right? In this situation, what happens normally with drowning victims? They go to the bottom and they'll stay there for a while, and then later on the body will float up. You had that in the Lacey Peterson case, and I wrote 3 books on Scott Peterson, and in that situation, Lacey was way down with anchors. I believe she was actually wrapped in like chicken wire as well, and that's how Scott Peterson got those cuts on his fingers. And when the wire mesh rusted through, when the seawater rusted through, those anchors could no longer hold her. That and a storm, there was a spring storm, and that caused her to dislodge from the bottom of San Francisco Bay, and then she floated up. So that's the other thing, is you have the same situation. Initially, a body will sink, but later on it will float. So you could have a situation, let's hope not, but you could have a situation where if she did fall into the water and she's sunk to the bottom somewhere and she's in sediment, that nature may just reveal her when circumstances change somewhat. When the temperature starts going up, when it gets a bit warmer, bacteria will have an opportunity to do their thing, and that may create a situation that solves itself. In the Kylie Rodney case, we know that if AWP didn't find Kylie, well, the water would have eventually receded and revealed the vehicle, right? Could we have a situation like that? If we don't find her in another week, another month, then I think you can't, it's very hard to hold on to a innocent scenario where why is this person so carefully hidden in a innocent scenario? So there's another good view of the kind of situation that they are looking at. And I suppose you could also ask the question, could there be animals, or could there be some kind of organism that one's got to factor into this? Bear in mind, we're 2 weeks later. And in the West Memphis 3 case, and I wrote about that case as well, you had 3 little boys where they were purposefully submerged in water in the Robin Hood Hills area, and they had a lot of injuries which they thought could be snapping turtles. So is there any wildlife in this area to consider? We also thought about that in the Kylie Rodney case. To what extent is wildlife a factor here? So someone says, someone asked, could NICOLA's body be in a different part of the river? That's another possibility, is if someone abducted her, someone took her in that park area, maybe they had a house nearby, or they were parked very close to the path. And I think that's something you want to look at. Are there any areas where you can park a car right next to the footpath? Did someone abduct her, and then perhaps later on he would put her into the river to suggest that that's how she died, right? In other words, to imply a accident scenario when it's not actually an accident scenario. So Faulding says, unless someone put her in a different part of the river somewhere, or she's fallen in somewhere, but he says it's a very short stretch. On a normal river, we can scan 10 miles a day and locate it very quickly. He said there's not enough current in the river Wire where police believe Bully may have fallen for it to have been moved downstream on the day she was missing. So that's kind of their belief. And then I think you've kind of got to test that. You've got to look at the tidal conditions and rainfall and the level that the river was, which is also the case in the Kylie Rodney case. You have to look at the level of the reservoir, because I think one of the mistakes people made was they assumed if she did drive into the river that the car would be visible from the water's edge. And I think people didn't realize that she may have gone in perpendicularly at speed. I suppose it's going to sound absurd, but I suppose the closest approximation to that scenario here is that she was possibly running away from someone, right? In other words, there was speed. She was running away from someone, tripped, and fell into the river, and that took her somewhere unexpected. Okay, so let's just see what he says here. I haven't actually played this. Let's just see what he says. Two more seconds. Okay.
Say that if you find nothing, there is nothing to find.
Generally, Susanna, yes. I mean, bodies can get lodged in reeds and show up months later. The sonar won't go into the reeds, but that's the idea of the divers. But as I said before, it was originally searched where she supposedly went in. I mean, I personally think if I rule this stretch of river out today where we're working, I don't think she's here. I think there's probably a third party involved. I mean, I had a long chat with, you know, Paul rang me last night, and Nicola's partner. We had a long chat for about half an hour. You know, these people are grieving. It's terrible. I met the family again yesterday morning. It's a very difficult situation with lots of horrible things being said on social media and also criticizing the police operation. Everyone is pulling the stops out here. Us, the police, they've got nothing to go on. That's the problem. We've just got a mobile phone, and detectives are working very hard to solve this.
So we kind of have a similar situation to AWP. This guy searches. He does concede that sonar has a bit of a problem looking into reeds. But anyway, he's done his search. He's kind of the expert, and he says, because I can't find anything, there's nothing there, and thus it must be foul play. And I think we've got to be cautious in taking a similar step. The other thing that he seems to be suggesting is that there's a third party involved, and he seems to be supportive and sympathetic to Paul Ansell, the victim, the Nicola's partner. He seems to be kind of sympathetic towards them. So you kind of get a sense that he's quite an opinionated guy, and he's got some strong opinions. Are his opinions valid, right? It does seem that way. Good to see you here, Marcus. Okay, so let's go on to the next story. If you're hearing strange noises, that's my dog snoring on my lap. I'm actually surprised he's this calm because I haven't taken him for a walk yet. I'll take him for one like at night after this live. Nicola Bully's friend identifies critical blind spot in a desperate appeal for evidence. And she says she's highlighted a missing section of road in the investigation into her disappearance, right? So she says, so she's saying there's a piece of road that doesn't have, that's exactly what I've been saying, that doesn't have cameras on it. And so she's saying, she's calling for anyone with dash cam footage to come forward as they just need answers. So she says, we just need some answers. We need actual facts. We need evidence. Anyone out there that feels they may have dash cam footage, there's a section of road that we're missing, Garstang Road towards St. Michael's. Right, and I think I want to quickly look at that. I think I know where it is, but let's just make sure. I hope I'm in the right area of the world. I've just searched it. Well, let me show you what I'm looking at. So this is where we are in the world, right? We are north of Wales in Lancashire. I used to live sort of in this area, Maidenhead. I also lived in Bristol. But it's apparently I think it's over here. I'm just trying to see. So there you see the River Wire, and there's St. Michael's on Wire, right? But look how far it is to the sea. Can you see it's a really long distance to the sea, and it's kind of a labyrinth to get there. It's a very convoluted sort of thing. I'm just trying to see where that. So there's the caravan park. So I just want to confirm quickly. I just want to get that address again. Garstang Road. Garstang Road. Okay. Okay, so that's over here. That's exactly what I thought. It's exactly what I thought. So you can see there's this little road that comes out here and then it goes over there. And there's some homes over here, right? And I think she went missing somewhere around here. So what they want to do is look at, well, I guess it's this road. I'm not actually sure if they've got cameras in this section here, but anyway, they're looking for dash cam footage on this road going that way. So I actually thought it was this road. But if you look at this map, this road penetrates the park very, very deeply. It's not only that there's a road there, there's also homes there. So it's a way that you could get someone into your home on foot, right? I mean, it's not like you had CCTV through the whole park. Once someone is in the park, the CCTV coverage thins out. But there are homes throughout the park, and then you could put someone in your car and go somewhere else, I suppose. But, think about the Kylie Rodney case, CCTV proved crucial. Think about the Idaho case, CCTV proved crucial. Is it going to be of much benefit here? Can they look at CCTV from the 27th, and is that going to show you anything? So as you can see, you're dealing with quite a complicated outdoor crime scene. It's not symmetrical. It's not simple. There's also this caravan park over here. Do you think there are CCTV cameras over here? I don't see any caravans. So maybe go over there. Let's go back to the caravan park, I think is here. It's not really letting me have a look at that. Anyway, so there's a farm caravan park here. Okay. And then the last news story before we get to my script is expert diver dramatically ends the search. He says she's not in the water. And that was hours after police finally admitted she could have left on a path not covered by CCTV. So can you see how the law enforcement, do you remember that clip I played right at the beginning where law enforcement said she didn't leave the area, it's not foul play, right? It's kind of a soldier mindset where they're insisting it's not foul play. And now, several days later, they can't find her. And now they've kind of got to concede well, we have found a little area that's not covered by CCTV. Tell me, I'm going to put you down. Yeah. So that's the one thing to mention. The other thing to mention is the search has expanded to Morecambe Bay, which is where the river meets the sea. So they are obviously, you know, if you're thinking that this is unlikely, that's unlikely, but you're still not finding her, well, then you search more, then you do start searching in areas that you haven't thought about. So in the same way that the search has started to second guess itself, remember in the Kylie Rodney case, they searched, there was another lake. There was another lake that they also searched. You think, well, maybe she's not in this lake, maybe she's in that lake, maybe she's not in this part of the river, maybe she is in the sea. In the same way, you've got to start second guessing, does the CCTV have limits, right? And thus, could there be a third-party foul play scenario? Okay. Now, as I said earlier, I just want to show you guys a few of the images on this page. So there's a picture of Paul Ansell, Nicola's partner, and you're going to get another view of him. We're going to play some video of him giving an interview. It looks totally different, I must say. It looks much softer. But that's a picture of Nicola's partner of 12 years. His name's Paul. He's 44, 45 years old, about the same age as Nicola. He's an engineer. I've got a question that I haven't been able to get the answer to. Does he have an alibi? Where was he on the 27th? And I don't know whether is that a incorrect question to ask, because if he's got an alibi, then you can exclude him, and then we don't need to think in that area anymore, right? Here is another view of the terrain that we're dealing with. You can see that is quite a gradual. Hang on, is that the right thing? Okay, yeah, so that is them, the search team packing up their gear, but you can see it's quite shallow. You can see, and you can also see the river's not streaming. It's not a current that is moving it's not an obviously strong current. And this is them sort of packing up their gear. Unsuccessful search. I'm going to take you through the route in a moment. So that gives you just a sense of where we're talking about. There's the park, and then there is the spot that she apparently fell in. And then I think there's some images here of him pointing into the river. So there you get a sense of how steep the embankment is, but bear in mind, when you're in the water, it's sort of 3 feet deep. So is that a situation where somebody could lose their life? And people had the same kind of disbelief in the Kylie Rodney case. There's no way someone would, and even some people still do today, there's no way someone could have driven into the reservoir by mistake. You have maybe a similar situation here. Could someone have just fallen into the river and drowned and died? I think it's unlikely, but if there's a medical situation that maybe she had a heart attack, so does she have any kind of medical history? You can see in this image, there's a little dirt thing over there. The problem with this is also because no one's kind of sealed off the crime scene or the scene. There's just no way of telling what the original footprints were in the area because it's all been trampled. Thanks, Elise. And so here's another image. Okay. So let me pay a little bit of attention to chat. Is there anyone here who doesn't know about this case? Is there anyone here who has just joined chat and doesn't know anything about this case? So Sophia says, understand that partner Paul was working from home. That is unfortunately a problem. It means that he was alone at home, and also that he would know where she was, and it was a Friday afternoon. So that to me is a problem. It's a reason why my spidey sense is sort of tingling. The fact that this happened on a Friday kind of troubles me. Stella says, I know Zilch. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little bit of background quickly. So briefly, and while I'm doing that, let me put this picture on screen. Let's do it like so. Let's do it like that. So briefly, these are the circumstances of the disappearance of NICOLA BULLEY, a 45-year-old unmarried mortgage advisor. And I think you've got to immediately ask the question just with those two words. She's unmarried, so her status is uncertain officially. And then also, she's 45 years old. It's sort of it can be a tricky age. It can be a tricky age for women. Maybe she wanted to get married and someone else didn't want to get married, or something like that, right? Also, she was in a 12-year relationship with her partner. Why not get married? What was sort of going on? Did the other person not want to get married? Did she want to get married? What is the situation there? But I think that's already a bit of a problem. You've got a uncertain relationship status. And in the Idaho case, I was wrong in that, but it's the right question to ask. Who has uncertain relationship status in that case? And the answer was, to some extent, Kaylee, right, Gonzalez, but also Brian Koberger. His relationship status was also uncertain. Ollie says, thanks for creating such a measured platform to discuss this case. Thank you. Ollie, you might not feel that way as we go a bit further into this. You might feel, wow, I think that's taking things too far. So I've kind of, yeah, it was in the morning. I'm kind of taking you slowly into a particular direction, and then the question is, does it make sense or doesn't it? So NICOLA went missing on 27 January, right? We're now at 8 February. It's almost 2 weeks later. She was taking her dog for a walk on a path by the River Wyre in the Lancashire village of St. Michael's on Wyre. She had just dropped her daughters off at school, and she logged into a work team's call. The last confirmed sighting of her was at 9:10 a.m. That's very important. That's very important. you want to be absolutely sure that that is the last sighting of her, right? Did the person who saw her at 19, is that person absolutely sure? Because if it's not 9:10 a.m., or yeah, if it's not 9:10 a.m., that can throw off the whole search. You know, in 5 minutes, she could have walked so much further this way or so much further that way. So it's very important to get that accurate. The other thing that's quite interesting is it's relatively early in the day. Would you expect a lot of dog walkers on a Friday? So just think about it in terms of patterns of behavior. Would you expect more than usual dog walkers on a Friday morning? Was the park normally less busy at that time or not? Right? Run the world, good to see you here. Catch the rest later, cool. It's interesting, the folks from America, it's morning there. For us, it's 9 o'clock in the evening. You guys are just starting your days. Okay, so police were contacted about her disappearance after her spaniel, Willow, was found running loose. So that's also quite interesting, is police were contacted by the public, not by Paul Ansell. And then I think you can start to ask the question, should he have known that she wasn't answering her phone? Or when did he realize she wasn't answering her phone? And how did he come to find out things were going on? How did he, where was he when someone contacted him to say, do you know where NICOLA is? Where was he? What was he doing? What was he dressed in? Were there clothes in the washer? Was he driving? Was he at home? Was he working? Was he on his computer? Was he in his office? Literally, where was he? That I think is quite important to ask. The person who found the dog tied the dog with a rope to the tree. The police were contacted at 10:50. Are you sure about the 10:50? Well, 10:50 is really late. If it's true that the police were contacted at 10:50, I think you've kind of got to wonder, shouldn't Paul have wondered, where is NICOLA by then? Let me just confirm that. That's quite an important point. Police contacted time. I just want to confirm that. That's actually a very important point. I can't. She disappeared around 9:20. But what time were the police called? Lancashire Police. So Lancashire Police say Bully sent an email to her boss at 8:53 a.m. This was followed by a message to her friend 6 minutes later. So again, you want to be absolutely sure, did she do that under duress? And one would imagine not, right? I'm trying to get just confirmation of that 10, because that's definitely... Family informed at 10:50 a.m. Phone discovered at 9:34. Doesn't really say when police were contacted. Let's see if I can get it here. I think you're right, though. It does look like it's... So her daughters are 6 and 9 years old. They were dropped at the local school. When her phone was found, it was still engaged on a work call. That makes you think something had just happened in a way, except, I mean, it hadn't. Her parents are Ernest and Dot Bully, and they've spoken of their dread. So let's have a look. It just doesn't show the time here. The one thing that you do want to see, they don't show you. It's the last thing is 9:35 a.m. Nicola's phone and Willow were found at a bench by another dog walker. And then the timeline stops. And then they say a woman is sought as a witness and nothing more. It's this lady. I think they have subsequently found her. So here is another image of a dog that is part of the search. I presume that's a cadaver dog. And here's a map, which I guess we're going to get to know quite well. Paul called police at 10:50 a.m. He had called from the dog park. Okay. So Paul called police at 10:50 a.m. So did the emergency call originate from Paul? So if you look at this map, let's bring it up a bit bigger. I'm a bit concerned about these roads coming down here, right? I'm quite concerned about how far this road penetrates into the park. And one of the last points where she was seen was around about here by a witness. So, and there are houses here. We'll look at a satellite image of this. And so it seems to be saying, look for Nicola over here, but maybe she should have been looked for over here. So if she walked the dog and she sort of went around here, that's not a very long distance from the end of that road to there. But one presumes that that's something that law enforcement have looked into in terms of CCTV. There's Garstang Road. So if there's any traffic from this area, you would imagine it might be seen on this road. So someone said she was never there. Well, there are quite a few witnesses. They saw her twice at 8:50. I don't want to go into conspiracy, but I suppose you could have someone dressed up looking like her, and so it really wasn't her. But I think that's pretty unlikely. Okay. So, so is it true that law enforcement were contacted by Paul Ansell? Is that definitely true? Okay. Grandma Bunny says the daughter came and called the school, then they called police. The daughter of who? Paul called police at 10:50. Let's just have a look at some of your comments. That's a good point. She wasn't seen at the bench. Marley says you don't expect your wife to go missing. Yeah, but if you take a dog for a walk, I don't think you'd expect the dog walk to last from. This is a really important point. If you take a dog for a walk, and I take my dog all the time, you don't take a dog for a walk from 9 a.m. to like 11 a.m. My dog walks last maximum an hour, right? So after 10 a.m., that's really getting on a bit of the late side. Yeah, she was last seen near the Rowan Water Lake. Okay. Okay. So let's put up this image again. It's the what I think is quite interesting with this image is it asking you to imagine someone falling into the water. The phone is there, and to me, although that's your first thought, the phone is on the bench. Your first thought is, oh, someone. If the phone's there, maybe someone fell into the water. But on second thoughts, people like this lady over here, why wouldn't she have the phone in her pocket or in her hand, right? The phone does seem to be a decoy. Why didn't she fall into the river with her phone? Anyway, yeah, we have another situation of a dog living to tell the tale. We had that in the Chris Watts case. We had that in the Henry van Breda case. We've had that in the Idaho case. And so what was it? What is this tale here? So the obvious explanation on day 1, 2, 3, 4 was that NICOLA BULLEY fell into the River Wyre near the Lancashire village of St. Michael's on Wyre. That's on the morning of January 27th, a Friday. But the fact that her phone was found on a bench right beside a steep embankment also suggests where she may have fallen in. But people don't just slip and fall into water and disappear. They scream, and no one heard a scream. There's also no sign that she slipped on the embankment. Her dog Willow was also found bizarrely without a harness and bone dry. So the other thing about this case that sort of reminds me of the Scott Peterson case is that's also how they sort of the story of Lacey's disappearance starts. Scott sees Lacey's dog, and I think it's got the leash on, and the leash is sort of wet and covered in leaves, but the dog's running around by itself, and it's like, oh, where's Lacey? It also starts with, I see a dog, I don't see the dog's owner. What's going on? Sarah says low tide on the 27th of January was 9:30 a.m. and high tide 3:15. So, I mean, that makes it even worse is that the river was at its lowest. So in other words, if it was an accident, I think you're dealing with 3 feet of water or less. In other words, it just becomes less likely. And the dog was dry, that's right. Okay. So the other thing that's a little bit bizarre is, why is the dog without a harness? Why is the dog without a harness? And I suppose a possible answer to that is, if the dog has a harness on and it's running around by itself, aren't you going to be thinking, where's its owner? Whereas if the dog doesn't have the harness on, you might just imagine that it's a neighborhood dog running around, right? In other words, the harness without the owner is possibly more likely to make you think, to alert somebody, right? To be worried. You get the idea that if this was foul play, someone needed to get time to get out of the area. In other words, they don't want, the dog is supposed to be like the phone, evidence that someone's not there, right? In the Idaho case, people think that they left the knife sheath there on purpose. I don't think that's true. But in this case, you would imagine they did leave the dog there on purpose, but why remove the harness? I suppose it's possible that Nicola removed the harness. I suppose it's possible that I've had a situation where my dog, it doesn't happen often, but my dog gets out of the harness. He might not want to come home. As I said, it doesn't happen often, very infrequently. And then he reverses, and then the harness can actually come off, especially if he's shaved. Could someone have faked asking for help? What do you guys think? Thanks, Don. Thank you. Elizabeth says it's not tidal in that part of the river. I imagine it is tidal, but to a very limited extent. I think there would be, in other words, the fact that the water washes into the river, washes into the sea, means that the sea acts as a kind of a dam that holds back the body of water to some extent. So I think that is a factor. Nicola always took the harness off. Okay. I think that's a possibility. I think that's definitely a possibility. And so it would make sense to go knock on all of those doors, like you had in the Delphi case. Start knocking on doors in that little town. Firstly around the park and then further around the town. That should have actually happened some time ago. Yeah, at the caravan park. Okay, so one would imagine after a frantic search that Nicola would have been found or washed up somewhere, except that she hasn't. Now, if the Kylie Rodney case, the Kylie Rodney case has taught us anything, it's not to jump to any conclusions. In that case, it seemed like a simple case of finding someone, but then no one could, and then people thought there was foul play. But so that was kind of the lesson in that case. They looked for somebody, they couldn't find her, and then they thought it's foul play, right? And then there's also the thing of they found her, and then they also thought it was foul play. So, like, just be careful jumping to conclusions. But sometimes when you're searching through the asymmetrical fabric of nature, especially where there are fluctuations in the water level, it's simply a case of not looking thoroughly enough, right? I'm saying when you're looking for someone in water, you can have a situation, as you had in the Kylie Rodney case, of simply not looking thoroughly enough. And I think that is always a possibility here. It's possible that they just haven't looked thoroughly enough. It's possible that the area where Nicola went missing is a kind of a labyrinth, right? And obviously, you kind of have a very similar situation with the Kylie Rodney case, where when you if you take that step and you say, we're isolating, we're drawing a line through the water, she's not in the water, then you need to start kind of looking on land, right? Then you start looking into the surrounding park area, and I guess you might want to look at freshly dug soil, and you want to look in bushes, and you want to look for clothing lying around, or whatever the case is. And then you say, well, now we exclude that. And then you go into the next step. And then what do you do then? You look at CCTV. But as soon as you do that, you are moving further and further away from that point where she was last seen. And in other words, you are going from known knowns to unknown unknowns, right? And that's not a very good way to search for someone. You want to search very thoroughly in an area where you know that person was and try to find something. Your chance of finding someone in a known scenario is far better than in an unknown scenario, right? But you want to go from known knowns to known unknowns to unknown unknowns systematically. You want to kind of take it step by step. So I would imagine an early error that this investigation may have made is not doing knocking on doors in the neighborhood like on day 3. Obviously, we didn't know that we'd get to this point, right? You think that when someone goes missing, it was an accident, or they might turn up, or whatever it is, and then when 2 weeks have gone by, well, it's too late. It's too late to put the crime scene tape around there. It's too late to go sort of knocking on doors the way that you would have. But I do think they need to apply the lessons we learned in the Delphi case. You need to now look at the locals first, right? I have said one way to search for NICOLA would be to simulate the same tidal arrangement, follow something that might simulate a person just fallen into the water. And so here's another collage of pictures taken of her in the last pictures of her. You can see the dog is there in the vehicle. It doesn't seem to have a harness on. I'm not sure if that pink thing is the harness. The other thing to mention is she looks quite well taken care of. She's dressed well. Is she on her phone in this image? I'm not quite sure if she's holding up something to her ear there, but she seems like she's taken care of, and it's not like she's suicidal. It's not like she has gone to the river and decided to end her life there, right? She emailed a friend. She's kind of at work, in a sense. She's walking the dog. She's just dropped her kids off at school. There's no sign of that. So so what are we talking about here? In the Kylie Rodney case, when a certain amount of time goes by and you simply don't find someone, then it seems less a case that they suffered from, it seems, from some accidental incident, and more that there's been foul play. Not necessarily. You don't say, we can't find the person, it's foul play. But each day that someone is missing, the needle starts to move away from an innocent scenario, from a fall or a crash to a scenario where they can't be found. Why? Because they've been hidden. Is that the case here? Has NICOLA been hidden? Stargirl says the caravan park owner was in business with. I'd like confirmation of statements like that. I'm sure you could speculate and repeat things, but I'd like confirmation. Okay, so that's where we are now, right? That's where we are now. Foul play, in my opinion, is now more likely in this case than an accident, right? And I'm going to do a Google search right now, because it's possible that NICOLA could be found right now, 5 minutes from now, an hour from now, 5 hours from now. She might be found tomorrow, right? And then it might turn out that it was an accident. But every hour that goes by, every day that goes by, every week that goes by, it's less and less likely that it is an accident. Let's have a look at the latest news. There's just the news about the blind spot and nothing. Friend unhappy with search area tourists. Partner of NICOLA BULLEY visits Nicola Bully visits scene with diving expert. And I think he was there for 10 minutes. I think they said that he was there for 10 minutes. Yeah, so we've seen that. Okay. I'm concerned that this crime occurred on a Friday. Right? I'm concerned that this crime occurred on a Friday, and I say that because the girls would not be in school for the whole weekend, right? And so theoretically, that gives a potential perpetrator a lead time to do their thing. I'm concerned that this crime occurred on a Friday. By the way, Nicola's vehicle is where she left it. It's still there, or not? It was there when she was missing, in the parking lot near the girls' school, and it looks like it's quite a nice vehicle. It looks like an SUV. So here is a map. And we're going to get to know this, I think, pretty well. There again is that Y-shaped road coming off. Is it what's the name of that road again? Garstang Road, right? Garstang Road. So it's this road. It's like a Y-shaped road coming off there. In the Delphi case, you also had this idea of, did someone cross a shallow river and then go away in a car on the other side? There's also a road over here. There's also a road over there. Anyway, so that's kind of a separate thing. So she drops her car off, and look where her car is on this side of the river. Leaves her car in the car park, and presumably this is a route that she's done many times. And I've seen photos of her with Paul, so where her and Paul are walking the dog. And so presumably someone close to her, or someone even not close to her, knows the route that she would take, knows her habits, knows what to expect, right, in a possible foul play scenario. Number 2, 8:43, she's seen walking along the tow path. Then she makes a right turn. We are going to look at this in more detail. She's spotted twice between 8:50 and 9:10 a.m. Notice there's a section where she walks along the road over here, and there's a section where there's also road over here. I think there's road here, and then that's the park. And then what I think's missing from this is there's a witness that saw her around somewhere over here. That's missing from this timeline. So when a woman disappears, and this is where some of you might say, well, I don't want to hear this, right? But when a woman disappears under suspicious circumstances, and right now Nicola's disappearance is suspicious, let me ask you that question. Would you say right now that this is suspicious? Timmy, can you relax? He's so hyper because he hasn't been taken for a walk. Do you guys, would you say that we've reached a point now where it's suspicious? Janet says no. Okay, so if you say someone has disappeared, imagine it's you, Janet. You disappear, your dog remains behind, your phone remains behind. And when should people start to investigate it in a particular way? Or yeah, at what point? Should they start at 10 days, 20 days, 30 days? When should they start? Is it Laney? Laney also says, no, I don't think it's suspicious. Most of you seem to think it is suspicious, though. So in terms of the poll, make sure you vote if you haven't. Do you think an accident is still likely? 49% say no. 15% say yes. And 28% say I don't know. But half of you are saying, and that's way more than twice as many who say that you think it is an accident. Half of you are saying, I don't think it's an accident. So if we do think it's suspicious, what is the next natural step? Rebecca says law enforcement should start investigating. Well, they are. They're looking at 500 lines of inquiry, as far as I know. So this is where some of you may feel offended. So when we are where we are right now, a woman has disappeared. Because it's been so long now, they've searched for her, they can't find her. Right now, it is starting to look suspicious. And so we have to ask the obvious question, and it comes up a lot in true crime, right? We've got to ask the obvious question, and the question is this. Well, let me ask you guys, at this point, what do you think the obvious question is to ask? Yeah, closest people to them. That's exactly right. It's just the most obvious question. Who was closest to her, and what do we know about that person? What do they know? Like, what is their knowledge of what was NICOLA's emotional state? Did NICOLA have any enemies? Was NICOLA in the middle of a house sale? Was NICOLA about to move to France or something? Was NICOLA about to was NICOLA in a relationship with somebody else? Was the person NICOLA with in a relationship with somebody else? How often did other people walk with NICOLA on that path? Does NICOLA have girlfriends? What has she said to them? Was she under unusual stress during this time? And bear in mind, it has been a stressful time for all of us. But was it unusually stressful for her or for him or for the kids or for whatever, right? Had they just moved into a new house? Had somebody in the family died recently? Had they inherited money, right? Is it a murder kind of scenario? You know, when you if you're in your mid 40s, 50s, sometimes parents die in that situation. Had Paul's parents died? Had NICOLA's parents died? What was there's some change in a family dynamic? Was there some work-related crisis taking place, which you actually have in the Coburger case? Looks like that he'd been fired as an assistant teacher. Do you have a work crisis precipitating something like this, right? Thanks, Crystal Kitty. And so, yeah, I mean, all of those are questions really related to what is going on, what is really going on in their relationship. Are they really happy? Are they really happy? Are they staying in her house or his house? Also, that whole thing that I mentioned earlier, they're in a 12-year relationship. Why didn't they get married? Does she want to get married and he doesn't? Or does he want to get married and she didn't? Or is it a situation that she's a very pretty lady and someone else wanted to meet her or whatever, but she's not available because she's in a relationship with someone else, but also not married? And then there are also children. Are they his children? If they are not married and they break up, don't her children go with her? So I do think one of the big things you want to look at is infidelity. What do her friends say? Was she faithful? Was he faithful? Was their relationship in a stable place or wasn't it? It's the same question you ask of Brian Koberger. Was he in a stable relationship? Did he have friends? If not, why not? Is there something that's unusually stressful going on? And so I think you've got to start asking these questions. And you might, as I say, you might take offense at this and say, how dare you? How dare you ask these questions? But if somebody's innocent, then they can offer an innocent explanation. So in the Murdoch case, it's quite simple. Do you have an alibi? Right? And then make sure that does that person have one or not? If the housekeeper says, oh, he was here for 40 minutes, are you sure about that? So in this case, does Paul Ansel have an alibi? And so far, my impression is, well, he was at home alone. He was working from home. Does that equal an alibi? So a little bit about him. Paul Ansel is an engineer. He's been in a 12-year relationship with NICOLA, and he's made a statement on camera. I don't like to say this. I don't like to say this. But unfortunately, there are a few problems with that statement. So I read a little bit about the case. I watched Paul Ansel on camera, and unfortunately, I noticed a few things. And it may not mean anything. You might say, you don't have a baseline on this guy, and I would say to you, you're right, I don't. You might say, you don't know anything about this case, and I would say, you know what, I could be wrong. You're right. Right? I could be wrong. But this is my assessment. So let me put up this image. We're going to look at this, and that's a very different image to the one we saw earlier. He kind of looks soft and cuddly over here. So this is my assessment, and I'm going to go through, I think it's 10 points. It was 8 points. 8 points. I'm going to go through 8 points. And then I'm going to take you through the map of where she went. So seeing Paul Ansel for the first time, it's hard to know what his baseline is. But he seems surprisingly fresh-faced for someone who ought to be worried, grief-stricken, and presumably not getting enough sleep. To me, his affect seems off. But one might say, you don't know him from a bar of soap. And I'd have to say, yes, that's true. And you can have a situation where, often with quite good-looking people, because they are quite good-looking, they appear to you to be fresh-faced and they don't look too unhappy or whatever, but it's because they're quite attractive. And so even their version of being glum is compared to, say, an unattractive person, looks quite sort of, I don't know, fresh-faced. But I've just got to say my impression was this isn't day one when you can be caught by surprise. And bear in mind, even in the Idaho case, you kind of got the feeling that Kaylee's family seemed to not appreciate the gravity of the situation. And sometimes it does take a while for that to take place. But this is a situation not where someone has died and you know that. This is a situation where you don't know what's happened to them, and how do you sleep at night with that being the case? So some people might say affect is unscientific and you can't say anything about that. I feel the opposite. Affect is a very important first step where you say, you know, if the effect seems appropriate, then you don't even need to look any further. And then obviously that's a test of your ability to see that. And it is a test, right? Catherine says the kids were not his. I don't know if that's true, but I suspect that it is true. And then you go into the next step. So if the effect isn't quite right, then you go into the next step. And so less than 30 seconds into his 2-minute interview, that's all we're dealing with, 2 minutes, Ansel cuts himself off as he's about to say the following. So this was another thing that bothered me.
As someone living in South Africa, you need to know the truth.
Yes, you do. Okay, I'll put that on screen in a second. By the way, the power is scheduled to go off here in 5 minutes. It hasn't been going off lately, but I just do not know whether it is going to go off. So if I disappear in 5 minutes, it's because of a scheduled outage. Thanks, Lainey, I appreciate it. So listen to what he says here. Look at his face, look how he looks down, and listen to what he says.
Just know every single scenario. Yeah, it is. There's just no 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 every single scenario.
What do you think he was trying to say there? There's just no Ev, looks down, and he says every single scenario. Let me play that again.
It is. There's just no every single scenario.
Right? That stood out to me kind of as a problem. He says there's just no Ev, which sounds like he's going to say evidence. He looks down, and then he says a word with Ev in it. He says every single scenario comes to a brick wall. But he clearly wasn't going to say there's just no every single scenario, right? And I want to stress this. Misspeaking doesn't mean you're a murderer. It just means you misspoke. And then you say, okay, he misspoke. Does that mean anything? Well, does he misspeak anywhere else? Are there any other problems, right? Let's play that one more time.
Society, it is just such a mystery.
Yeah, it is. There's just no every single scenario.
Okay. So I also don't like those words. I don't like that he, out of nowhere, he talks about a brick wall. He says, coming up out of nowhere. I just don't like that. I don't know why he mentions that. Listen to what he says.
Comes to a brick wall, every single one of them. Every single scenario comes to a brick wall, every single one of them.
So I can't say more than that. I can't say it's not very scientific, but I just don't like him talking about a brick wall. It's a very symbolic statement, but it could also be something that is seeing in his mind. It could also just be the way that he speaks. I just don't like it. In the Chris Watts case, he talked about earth-shattering, and that also stood out to me. And I was like, I don't like him using such a severe term. And then it turned out that he dug a hole at the well site, right? He also spoke about a ghost town, and you think about someone in a house where there are dead people, or someone has died, or at a well site in the middle of, before the sun comes up. It's also like a ghost town. He's using very symbolic languages, and we are going to compare this to Chris Watts, right? So, yeah. Okay, so that's the first thing to mention. Then he talks about going round and round and round, right? And this is kind of to do with sorry about that. This is to do with relationship dynamics. Sorry about that. It's just this ad needs to play out.
I think it's just all day long.
Right, and so yeah, he talks about round and round and round. This is just a few seconds later.
And that's all we're doing. That's all we're doing.
How are you?
I think it's just all day long. That's all. And then I think it's just all day long. That's all we're doing. And do the whole thing again. And then I think it's just all day long. That's all we're doing. Scenario again. And do the first scenario again. And then go back to the first scenario again. Going through every scenario, around and round. Sitting there going round and round and round. Is sitting there going round and round and round. All we're doing is sitting there going round and round and round. All we're doing is sitting there going round and round and round, going through.
And the reason why that bothers me is because it kind of feels like, sorry about that. It kind of feels like the language he may use in a discussion with Nicola. If they're sitting in their lounge, he may have said to her something like, it's the same scenario over and over again. We're going round and round and round. So almost like, why don't you want to get married? Why don't you want to do this? Why don't you want to do that? And you kind of have the situation in the words that he's using there that feel strange to the whole round and round and round. It reminds me, I think Terry said, it sounds a little bit like back and forth. By the way, if the power is going to go out, it might go out in the next minute. So if I disappear, that's what it is. But do you see what I'm saying? It's this idea that he's talking about a search, but in a way that evokes something that feels like a relationship that's not resolving. And I said right at the beginning that we're dealing with someone whose relationship status is uncertain. She's unmarried. She's been in a relationship with this guy for 12 years. Is that something that's bothering her, or is it something that's bothering him? Is she the one that's saying to him, I want to get married. I'm 45 years old. We've got kids. I love you. Let's be in a relation. Let's get married. And that's been going round and round and round. He doesn't want to get married for whatever reason. And it keeps coming back to that round and round and round. And maybe she said, well, if you don't want to get married, then I want to leave you because I do want to get married, right? Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe he wants to marry her, but she doesn't want to get married for whatever reason. Maybe there's a financial thing. And so around that sticking point, they've been going round and round and round. Maybe it's a situation where they can't agree on marriage. And so that may lead potentially to her leaving, and then she takes the kids. And if they've been together for 12 years, maybe he's gotten really close to the girls. And maybe that's the thing. He loves them, maybe he doesn't love her. You know, it could be a thing like that. I'm just saying the round and round and round. Does that make you think of a search? And why is he getting irritated about round and round and round? I mean, surely you'd want the searchers to keep searching and search. Wouldn't you want that situation? You know, like search the same place again. But he just the language to me makes me think that he's subconsciously talking about a relationship dynamic, not the search. Let's play it again.
All we're doing is sitting there going round and round and round, going through every scenario, and then go back to the first scenario again and do the whole thing again. And then I think it's just all day long. That's all we're doing. That's all we're doing. comes to a brick wall, every single one of them. And then all we're doing is sitting there going round and round and round, going through every scenario, and then go back to the first scenario again and do the whole thing again. And then it's just all day long. That's all we're doing. That's all we're doing.
As I say, you can imagine him talking in exactly those words to Nicola. That's all we're doing. We're going round and round and round, you know, and I don't want this situation. I don't want the same scenario over and over again. I want either we must get married or stop asking me to marry you, whatever it is, right? Why is he complaining about the search? The other thing that bothers me is that I don't think he ever mentions her name in this entire clip. It's 2 minutes long. I don't think he ever says Nicola's name. And I'll get to it a little bit later in this analysis, but he never actually sort of appeals directly to the camera where he says, this is what she looks like. You know, this is what I know about her going to the park. He doesn't like volunteer information. He responds to what is being asked. He isn't like volunteer, you know, I'm worried about this. And I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So that's the other thing. So let's go on to number 3. Sorry, number 3 is, in terms of this round and round and round, you'd think he'd be supportive of trying to find Nicola, no matter what. And I agree that it's a weak supposition. I agree that if you say, you know what, I don't know if I agree with that. I agree that it's quite weak. You might say, you know, intuitively, I don't see that at all. I agree that it's not very strong, but going round and round and round could be an allusion to arguing and being stuck in a certain kind of relationship scenario. So British folk talk about going round and round and round when talking or arguing, don't they? Right? If you're from England, do you agree with that? That you might say that in reference to, you know, we've been arguing, we've been through this before, we're going round and round and round. Can you imagine that being part of a discussion? Or do you think that that's reaching? James Houghton says he doesn't mention her name once. Okay, then are these shadows of Chris Watts? So have a look at this image. Right? And I must say, the more I looked at this, the more my heart sort of sank, because I was like, I covered the Chris Watts case in incredible detail. I don't know if anyone covered it more deeply than I did. I wrote, 13 books on the Chris Watts case. I blogged about it. I really turned that case inside out. And what I didn't like, I didn't look at this footage and say, I want to think about Chris Watts. I want to be reminded of Chris Watts. I didn't ask for that. But I ended up looking at this and kind of saw all of these parallels. And so have a look at that image and have a look at this one. So do that. So we have the upper lip tucked over the lower lip. And you have a situation where Ansel seems like he's trying not to smile, right? He's asked how bad, how difficult the situation is. But the real difficulty he seems to be having is trying not to smile on camera. Right? Shall I bring that up a bit bigger? Yeah, the power is still on so far. So he also says the following. I'm just going to play it. I'll keep those pictures on screen. Just get through this ad. He also says in the interview, it's a very short interview, and he says, I don't want to elaborate on that. What do you think he's talking about when he says that? Let me say that again. For those of you who know this case and who've watched this, when he says, I don't want to elaborate on that, what do you think he's referring to? Right? He's referring to the kids. He doesn't want, I don't want to talk about the kids. Right? So let me play that and then I'll show it to you. Just listen.
I don't want to really elaborate on that. I just, for them. It's just about the girls, that's it. I'm there for them. I don't want to really elaborate on that. It's just about the girls, that's it. I'm there for them. I don't want to really elaborate on that. It's just about the girls, that's it. I'm there for them. I don't want to really elaborate on that.
So again, in the same way that the round and round and round is that kind of a symbolic language for something else, when he says, I'm only here for the girls, but I don't want to elaborate on that. It's like simply saying, I don't really want to, I'm here talking on camera. I don't actually mention NICOLA's name. I am here for the girls, but I don't really want to talk about that. He's basically saying what he doesn't want to talk about, right? It does make you wonder, is this about the girls? Is this about that he wants to be here for them? Because if you think about it, isn't the real question, shouldn't he be here for NICOLA? Right? I should be here for her. I'm here for NICOLA. I'm here to find NICOLA. And I think another question to kind of ask, and I'm sorry, it's an innocent question. Have you seen Paul looking for NICOLA? Have you sort of seen him walking around just independently, searching? Because you have this weird situation in so many cases, John Monet Ramsey, the Madeleine McCann case. I can mention a couple of other cases as well. Everyone's searching for someone. Another case is Suzanne Morphew. Everyone's searching for someone. Why is the person that's closest to them seems to be relying on everyone else searching, right? Let me play that again.
Just like I say, it's just about the girls, that's it. I'm there for them. Think about that. Just focus, just like I say, it's just about the girls, that's it. I'm there for them.
I'm just here for them. I'm here for the girls. And you kind of get a sense that, did he want to marry her? Did he want to not marry her, but he wanted the girls? What are we actually talking about here? But it is quite concerning that his number one priority is the girls, when theoretically, if it's an accident, she could still be out there. I mean, she could be, doesn't he want to find her, right? Isn't the number one priority finding her? And you could say that's insensitive. A normal father would say, I'm really worried about the girls. They are my priority. You could say that. But the way that he says it, and then I'm not going to elaborate on that, just seems kind of guarded.
It must be so difficult.
I don't know how I'm coping. I don't even want to actually think about that. Just focus, just like I say, it's just about the girls, that's it. I'm there for them.
So he talks about not wanting to think about something. Then he says, I'm just focused on the girls. What about being focused on the search? Focused on the news of the search, focused on that thing. I mean, if the girls are in school, you can do something else. And I've said this before, one of the things missing from this interview is he's on camera. It's a chance to appeal to the public for help, and he doesn't do that. It's a chance to reach out to the public and say, can you guys join the search? Can you help me find NICOLA? is he trying to find Nicola, or is he already in a way given up and is now focusing on the girls? So let me just play it one more time where he says, I don't want to elaborate on that.
I don't even want to actually think about that. Just focus, just like I say, it's just about the girls, that's it. I'm there for them. I don't want to really elaborate on that.
I don't want to elaborate on that. And look how he sort of blinks, kind of a long blink in that moment.
That's it, I'm there for them. I don't want to really elaborate on that.
Right? Now, remember when I was comparing this interview to Chris Watts, one of the things I thought seems to be different is that Chris Watts did some of those slow blinks that seem to be shutting out the viewer. And I thought to myself, that is one difference between the two interviews, because he doesn't seem to do that. But this seems to be an instance where he does do that. I've just caught it now, where he's talking about the girls and he's saying, okay, I don't want to talk about that. And then he does that slow blink. Let's watch that again. Let me do this full screen.
Girls, that's it, I'm there for them. I don't want to really elaborate on that.
There it is, right? Just that I don't want to really talk about that and long blink, right? And then Chris Watts said something similar during his sermon on the porch. Let me play that. You might just hear the beginning of it.
Are you sick of having issues with your webinars?
Yeah. I'm more sick of power failures, but so far so good. Okay, listen to this.
It wasn't like an argument. We had an emotional conversation, but I'll leave it at that. But it's...
Or did you guys get into an argument before she left?
It wasn't like an argument. We had an emotional conversation, but I'll leave it at that. But it's...
This might be a tough question, but or did you guys get into an argument before she left?
It wasn't like an argument. We had an emotional conversation, but I'll leave it at that. But it's...
So what's going on there is kind of the same thing. He sort of shuts him down. He says, I'll leave it at that. In the same way, he's being interviewed and he shuts, this is Paul Ansell, he's being interviewed and he shuts down what he's talking about by saying, I don't want to elaborate on that, right? Chris Watts says, I'll leave it at that. Ansell says, I don't want to elaborate on that, right? And then all of these attempts to suppress a smile, and this is in the Chris Watts, and it,
I don't want to take my eye off that.
And in Ansell's case, you have all of these attempts to suppress a smile that's threatening to come out, and then eventually it does, right? Eventually it does come out. Eventually this. Right? It's the same as this. And this. Right? You can, it's such a big smile that you can actually see his teeth. It's kind of a slightly embarrassed smile. And I'm going to now play the footage so you can see it when it happens.
It must be heartwarming to see the public response. Hundreds of people trying to help.
It's amazing. It is right now. It's the only thing that we can take is, that level of support is out of this world. It gives us a great amount of comfort knowing that that's going on. They don't have anything else, do we?
Well, there's hope.
Yeah, we're never ever going to lose the hope. It gives us a great amount of comfort. Can take is, you know, that level of support is out of this world. It gives us a great amount of comfort.
Not sure why it's struggling to...
Knowing that that's going on. They don't have anything else, do we?
Well.
Right, and so the fact that he's smiling isn't the end of the world, but it's when he smiles. He smiles when he says, we don't have anything, right? And Chris Watts also used the same expression. He says, nothing. You know, I came home and there's nothing, right? He is smiling at the time when he says they don't have anything. That shouldn't be something to smile about.
Knowing that that's going on. They don't have anything else, do we?
Well, there's hope.
Yeah.
Okay. Then Ansel also says the following, and I want to just highlight this image. So listen to him say, she vanished into thin air.
Yeah, we're never ever going to lose the hope. Of course we're not. But right now, it is as though she has vanished into thin air. Like she has vanished into thin air. She has vanished into thin air. Like yeah, vanished into thin air. Like.
Right. So those are his words. He says, and there's a lot of, you see, there's a lot of lip licking, and his eyes that have been fairly stable are looking all over the place. He sort of looks up, he's licking his lips. He seems fairly, what's the word, like his face seems fairly calm, a calm exterior, but then every now and then it gets animated. And this is an example where it gets animated, where he talks about her disappearing into thin air.
She has vanished into thin air. Like, yeah, just it.
And it's not just that his face is animated, he tosses his head as well. He sort of like talks with emphasis when he says that. Let's watch that again.
She has vanished into thin air. Like, yeah.
Right, and then can you see almost a smile there as well? She's vanished into thin air. There's emphasis there, and it's not the kind of emphasis you'd expect, where it's, I'm frustrated that we can't find her. It's almost like certainty that she's disappeared, right? And he says this with the licking of his lips thrown in. That's possibly to suppress another smile. That's a micro expression you capture if you slow it down. And where he says she just vanished into thin air, Chris Watts said she vanished. Sorry, disappeared into thin air.
Sure.
Let me just play that quickly where Chris Watts says she vanished, sorry.
She's not getting back to her, like, she doesn't get back to me, that's fine, like, she gets busy during the day, but she didn't get back to her people, which was very concerning, and Nicole called me when she was at the door, and that's when I came home. And then walked in the house, and nothing has vanished, nothing was here. Then walked in the house, and nothing has vanished, not the door, and that's when I came home. And then walked in the house, and nothing has vanished, nothing was here.
So if you know the Chris Watts case, you know that him saying vanished, and you kind of get a sense of duping delight there. It's because he knows why they vanished and how they vanished, and he's quite proud of himself. He thinks he's pulling the wool over your eyes, right? The problem with that term is it's too strong a term and it's too certain a term. If you arrive home and your dog's not there, or someone who's normally at home isn't there, you wouldn't say vanished. You would say they're not there. Arrived home and they weren't home. You wouldn't say vanished. Vanished implies that someone is made to disappear. I've made them vanish. I've made them, you cannot see them anywhere. And that's why I don't like him using the term or terms disappeared into thin air. It's too certain and it's too, what's the word, absolute. He can say, you know what, she's disappeared without a trace. That's a little bit better. But to say disappeared into thin air basically suggests that she isn't going to be found. And he knows that. How does he know that, right? It's the same thing in the Chris Watts case, the certainty that someone is not going to be found. And he even uses the word impossible. Somewhere in the interview he says it's impossible. So, and then he also says, we're not going to give up hope. Well, if it's impossible, shouldn't you give up hope, right? So I don't like look at this and say, I want it to be foul play. I want this to be the suspect. I want to do a witch hunt or whatever. I'm simply saying, I look at this and I can't help seeing similarities with Chris Watts. Does it mean something? What does Patrice say? Yeah. So the problem is what we're seeing isn't looking good. The fact that they're in a 12-year relationship that's not, what's the word? It's not formalized. And I'm not saying you may not, I mean, I'm not married. I'm not saying if you're not in a relationship like that, that's wrong. I'm simply saying in a situation where somebody disappears and the surrounding fabric is the custody of little girls and are you in a formalized relationship and does the person have an alibi? And I don't like the fact that this happened on a Friday, because you have a situation where the next day you're not at work, and what can you do when you're not at work in a situation like that? In other words, if it's premeditated, a Friday is useful because people are doing other things. You don't take your kids to school. No one's going to notice that mom's not taking the kids to school the next day, right? Then he also says the following. He says, it seems like a dream I can't wrap my head around. Apologies for the audio again.
We could live our own life, or...
So listen to this.
Just like a dream. Just cannot get my head around. Impossible. Just further on, it just seems absolutely impossible. Just like a dream. Just cannot get my head around.
Now I don't like that either, because it sounds also like he's talking about possibly a relationship situation, like this is an impossible relationship. I can't get my head around it, right? Let me play that again.
It just seems absolutely impossible. Just like a dream. Just cannot get my head around.
It's like a dream I can't get my head around. And Chris Watts used those same words. He said, it's like a nightmare that I can't seem to wake up out of, right? Should I play that? He says, it's like a nightmare that I can't wake up from.
It's like a nightmare that I just can't wake up from.
Chris, when did you...
It's just earth-shattering. I don't feel like this is even real right now. It's like a nightmare that I just can't wake up from.
Just seems absolutely impossible. Just It's like a dream. I just cannot get my head around.
Yeah, like where they went, and it's just earth-shattering. I don't feel like this is even real right now. It's like a nightmare that I just can't wake up from. It was like a ghost town. Like she wasn't here. Kids that I just can't wake up from. It's just earth-shattering. I don't feel like this is even real right now. It's like a nightmare that I just can't wake up from.
Any of it. It's just like a dream. I just cannot get my head around.
And in the Chris Watts case, you may remember the nightmare that he couldn't wake up from was that he was having an affair, right? He was in an affair that was hard to get out of, and that was actually the nightmare. In this case, you kind of might ask the same question. It's strange that he says it's a dream, or he seems to be saying that not that it's a nightmare, but that it's surreal, that it's a dream. But it's kind of also bringing into it that things don't seem real. And although it's true that in a situation like this, you can have trauma that makes something seem hard to believe. You can have that. Again, it's the way that he says it. It just brings into one's experience in terms of true crime. It brings back this idea of was there some other thing going on that was a nightmare, right? Was something else going on that was a nightmare, and that he wanted to wake up out of it, or a dream that he wanted to get out of?
Absolutely impossible. Just like a dream. I just cannot get my head around.
Right? It's a dream that I can't get my head around. What is he talking about? Is he talking about, I mean, it's a strange words to use about someone disappearing. Isn't he actually talking about some kind of relationship scenario? He talks about it's impossible. Isn't he talking about there's some arrangement that's impossible and he can't get his head around it? Is it the arrangement she wanted to impose on him, or an arrangement he needed to happen, right? Okay. So can you see that the things I've highlighted here, it's not just one thing. It's not like just his affect that to me is problematic. Just in general, when I watched it, I thought you seem more nonchalant than I would just expect. I would expect that you can't sleep at night. You don't look as though you're struggling with insomnia. And you can argue that that's not scientific. And you could argue you don't know this guy. But the other side of it is, isn't it a little bit inappropriate? Isn't the effect inappropriate? And when you dig deeper, you find more signs of that. So if any of that strikes you as suspicious, the other problem is if someone, let's say you say, you know what, I agree with you. You know what, I agree with you. It is suspicious and he is suspicious. Well, you've just made things kind of more difficult, right? Because the other problem is if someone did attack Nicola out in the open and she's not in the water, then how do you remove her remains from the scene without being seen? How does she not scream in that scenario? How does she leave the park without the dog following her, right? How does all of this sort of play out if it's a foul play scenario? So it's one thing to say, you know what, I can see how it's not an accident. The problem is, even though we might say that's suspicious or he's suspicious, it's very hard to even begin to say, well, then what did happen? What's your scenario? If it is suspicious, what is your scenario for what did happen? Can you see? It's also that this is supposed to have happened in broad daylight, like at basically 9 o'clock on a Friday morning, where the other dog walkers walking around, right? Now, suppose you can imagine the Sarah Everhard case where Sarah's walking and a policeman is in plain clothes and he stops near to where she's walking, and I guess he calls her over and then abducts her. You could have a similar-ish situation here where possibly Paul or some other person or a third party stops near the path, and although she's walking her dog, she deviates from the path to maybe he hoots at her or whatever, and she deviates from the path to talk to him, and then that is how she leaves the dog behind and why the dog isn't distressed. Well, she was talking to someone, got in the car and left. But then how does the phone end up where it did? Well, maybe when he hooted, she was there, or maybe he called her or whatever. But then did no one else notice that? Maybe he approached her from, he'd parked the car, approached her from somewhere, and then they both walked back to the car together, and it just seemed completely normal. It's also possible that she was in a relationship with someone, not Paul, someone else, and that wasn't working out, and ... It was somebody she knew, but someone besides Paul. I suppose it's possible. So the problem is, if you look at this image here, the problem is, how can you get into and out of that situation without being seen by someone? So if she's not in the water, how do you get someone out of that area without being seen? Under duress. There were numerous dog walkers who saw Nicola every few minutes. It's unlikely that her remains were taken from the scene. So it's unlikely that, do you agree with this? It's unlikely that she died there. You know, in other words, she was killed there and then taken away. You kind of get the idea she must have, if it was foul play, she must have been taken while she's alive from that scene. And for that to happen, was it someone that she knew, or was it someone that she didn't know but who held a gun to her side or something? And I think that's where you've got to think about the Delphi case, where you look at how were those girls gotten from A to B under duress. And I can't help wondering, is there intertextuality with the Delphi case in the sense of, did someone watch television and find out, because there have been some groundbreaking things in the Delphi case, didn't they think, oh, you know what, there's a river near to where I live. Oh, you know what, there's a park near to where I live. Oh, you know what, there's a bridge near to where I live. Oh, do you know what, I also know that area quite well. Oh, do you know what, this person got away with it for 5 years, maybe I could. Maybe someone was triggered or got an idea from the Delphi case. I mean, it's been extremely high profile of late. So if there are remains, I think it's unlikely that her remains were taken from the scene, which means they must still be there. So are her remains buried, or her remains underwater, or did she leave the scene in a foul play scenario? Okay, Boris, I think we're gonna throw you out. I don't like that kind of comment. Totally unnecessary. Okay, so a final point about Ansel that disturbs me is on camera, and I mentioned this earlier, is on camera. This is his opportunity on camera to reach out to the public for help, to mention the helpline. I don't know if there's a website, and to volunteer information, to say what she was wearing, to give a bit of a description. But instead of doing any of this, he simply seems to confirm that it's one big mystery. Instead of help, it's like your chance to reach out to the public, just as Chris Watts had that chance. Instead of giving some information, the last time I saw her this, the last thing she said to me that, you know what, I thought maybe she could have gone to a friend, or just volunteering some ideas. Instead, he confirms that it's mystifying. He confirms that it's there are no clues, and he seems to enjoy that. That is problematic. What does he do to assist in the search for Nicola in terms of volunteering, offering, suggesting information? If anything, he seems to confirm that the search for Nicola is pointless and impossible, while at the same time promising never to give up hope. That is a psychological mismatch, which is never a good case, a never good sign in cases like this. It feels like Britain's version of the Delphi murders, doesn't it? Bridges, rivers. As of this writing, Nicola Bulley is still missing. Let's confirm that. I'm just going to do a Google search right now. One hour ago, Nicola Bulley's friends urges police to search abandoned house and outbuilding. So this is the latest news. While detectives who were adamant missing mother fell in water now admit she could have left on path not covered by CCTV. Okay, so now I'm going to sort of wrap up by, I'm going to take you to a Sky News graphic that maps the route that she took and also shows a photographic shows photographically and through video where she was. Let's see if I can find that. Hope I can find it. I think yeah, it is. Okay. Okay, so this is from Sky News. This is one of the last images of her. Hair in a ponytail. With her dog. And I'm going to play this piece. Nicola Bulley's journey. Nicola Bulley's journey. Okay, so you can see. Let me put it up to this side. You can see in this. You can see on this map. There's that Y-shaped corridor of road coming down. There's water on the inside of that road, of those houses, but there's a string of homes over here, and so you have a second witness who saw her over here. And so the question is, couldn't someone have driven onto this road, to the end of this road, which goes, as I say, it penetrates so far into this park, and couldn't that have been a route out of that park, right? And so where she's last seen is very close to this road. This distance is very close to a road, and a second witness seems to have seen her walking along this loop like this. So could she have been abducted into a vehicle here, and then someone, one person or another person, there might have been two people, walked and put her phone on this bench and then left the scene? Could that have happened? Could it have happened in a van? We know the Eliza Fletcher case happened in a van. Could it have been a similar situation to the Eliza Fletcher case, a sedative being used as well? So anyway, let's watch this footage. I want to put it on full screen.
A week ago, Nicola Bulley dropped her children off at school in the Lancashire village of St Michael's on Wyre and headed on foot along Blackpool Lane with her dog called.
Unfortunately, I can't freeze it and show you what I'm talking about, but let's go back a few. I'll play the whole thing and then we'll come back to it. But the parts that you also want to pay attention to is where she's walking and where there's a road, where there's traffic going by where she's walking. Those are all opportunities for her to be abducted by someone in a car and taken elsewhere, right?
Blackpool Lane with her dog called Willow. Along this fairly busy road, she would have walked past the parish church before making her way over this footbridge which leads to the path by the River Wyre. Nicola began walking east along this path at around 8:43 a.m. Lancashire police say at 8:47 a.m. the mother of two bumped into another dog walker, seen here on CCTV in a red coat, on the lower field. Officers say the pair knew each other and their dogs interacted briefly before the woman, who they've now spoken to, left the field a short time later via the river path. 6 minutes later, at 8:53, Nicola used her phone to send her boss an email. And at 9:01 a.m, she joined a work Teams conference call. 9 minutes later, at 9:10, a second witness who also knows Nicola saw her, but this time on the upper field, and still with her dog Willow. The dog was off the lead and it wasn't in its harness, which officers say wasn't unusual and was all part of her daily routine. That was the last confirmed sighting of the 45-year-old. Police say they are particularly interested in what happened between then and 9:20 a.m. because they believe her phone was on this bench at 9:20. At 9:30, the work conference call ended, but Nicola's phone remained dialed in. Nicola's dog Willow was found by a witness at 9:33, running between this gate to the field and the bench where the phone was located. At the same time, Willow's harness was also discovered on the grass between the bench and the river's edge. Martin Brunt, Sky News.
So that's quite interesting. The harness was found between the bench and the river's edge. So it's almost like, here's the bench, phone on the bench. This was where she was, harness halfway to the river. And that seems to be really saying, hey, she must have fallen into the river. The other thing that I find problematic is the fact that Paul Ansell seems to accept that she's disappeared, almost like, yes, she did fall in the river and the river did carry her away. And so I accept that. Why does he accept that and we don't? Like, why does he kind of go, you know what, I understand that they're looking for her and they just can't find her. But I mean, and that's a question I think the interviewer should have asked. What do you think happened to her? And I wouldn't be surprised if he says, yeah, I think she did fall in the river. If you were asked that question, would you give the same answer? If someone interviewed you on camera and said, what do you think happened to her? My answer would be, I think it's possible that she fell in the river, but I don't think it's probable. I think it's more probable that something else happened. And then you say, well, what else happened? I'm not sure, but I think it's more probable that she could swim, she didn't scream. And why didn't she fall in the river with holding the phone? Why was the phone put down first, right? The other thing I want you to look at, and I think I'm going to play this video again, this time with the sound off. I want you to look at a gravel road coming from the other side. Now, one of the things that fooled me in the Delphi case was that I was definitely confused about which road route the killer took. I thought it was from, I think it's the south side, and it turned out that he lived on the south side, but he came from the north side. You could have the same situation here, where you focusing your bias on one side, meanwhile it needs to be on the other side. Bear in mind it's a shallow river, and the park doesn't extend to the other side. So if you came from the other side, then maybe you wouldn't be seen, right? There's a dirt road that also comes into the area from the other side. Let me show you that. So I'm going to play the same thing again. There's some of the sound off. Let's do it like that and that. Where's the sound? Can I turn the sound off? Okay, so notice how busy the road is right over here. Now you can't imagine a car stopping here and doing something and no one seeing anything. Seems unlikely, especially on a Friday morning. Then over the bridge, and here she can, so look at this area right over here. Can you see where the cursor is? There's a road that goes there as well. And so you might think that the calls were staged and the text was staged, but you had a witness also walking her dog. And these are the problems here. You've got all of these witnesses. Did someone lay in wait, like Koberger, and wait for these witnesses to pass by and then they seize their chance? So that's the part that I think is really important to look at, right? That road coming all the way down there. And a second witness, I don't really like this map because it doesn't confirm, did she only reach that point or did she go around the circuit? My impression is that the second witness must have encountered her here, or did she see her cross from there? And there is that road I'm talking about on the other side. It's a dirt road coming all the way to that section there. There's a dirt road over there. I would want to really look into this area. Also, do you need to look into this body of water or this body of water over here? Presumably they have. Okay, so that is my story. I think the last thing I'm going to do is just take you through some images and then some questions, and then that'll be it. If only dogs could talk, right? So there's a good view of the bench, and if you think about it from a staging perspective, if you put her phone there and you put the dog's harness right in front of that bench, aren't you trying to create the impression that someone did fall in the water there? These are the last images of NICOLA BULLEY. Unfortunately, you can see the shoes she's wearing. Unfortunately, because they didn't treat it as a crime scene, you can't really try and find her shoe prints to establish what's going on there. Was she wearing any jewelry? Did she have a wallet with her? A small little detail in this image, but probably worth mentioning. Can you see there's a little ball over there? So did she take a ball with her? Did she normally take a ball with her? Did she have a ball with her on that occasion? Could she have gotten herself into trouble throwing the ball ended up in the water, the ball ended up in bushes? Could that have been a situation? Did she have a ball with her? Did she always take a ball with her? Did she have a ball with her on that occasion? Can you see the ball over there? What was the behavior of this dog normally? Did the dog stay with her most of the time? Did he run off? Did he sometimes go through a fence at a particular area? Was an obedient dog? Did the dog have problems with another dog owner? That's another possibility. I think another question you want to ask, all the dog owners that go to that park, do they know of someone who is strange or weird? A dog owner or a dog owner who they've had issues with, right? I think you do need to ask those questions. Also, the dog walkers, have they seen Paul there before, and have they seen Paul arguing with, have they witnessed Paul arguing with Nicola in public? Have they heard gestures and kind of a sign that things don't seem to be kosher? Another question to ask is, did Nicola and Paul often walk together, and then did that stop at a certain point? Did Nicola often sit on this bench, or did she tend to walk and sort of come back? Did she often do work in this park? Why was she doing work that day away from home? Why not go home and do work? It kind of seems a bit strange. Why would you work while walking your dog? I don't. And then I guess one of the big questions is it too early, or is now the right time? Think about the Kylie Rodney case. Is it too early to say she's not in the water? Right? Remember what happened in the Kylie Rodney case. And I think the answer is keep looking in the water, but also look at other possibilities. Keep an open mind and continue with the scout mindset. Continue gathering information. And that's the bottom line. Do you agree with that? Foul play now seems likely, more likely than an accident. And this is the area that I'm kind of concerned with, that a car could have come down here. There's a caravan park over here that's also very close. The road area here is also very, very close. So you could have someone that lives here, right? You could have someone who lives here, or someone who lives here that has seen her, right? Coveting, seeing her often, and you could have a situation like that. Is this road over here relevant? Is there another road that connects from the other side? And that's the image I've actually got behind me, and unfortunately I block out the dog. The dog certainly adds an interesting element to the story. The water as well. So that's a temperature graph. On the 27th of January, you can see the temperature was just slightly lower than it had been, right? Like a few days before. The temperature was lower than earlier in January, but not particularly unusual. The next day was similar temperature, and then it was slightly warmer. Does that have any bearing on all this? Not in an obvious way. Did it rain around this time or subsequently? To be honest, I haven't found that out yet. Is rain a factor here? to be honest, I don't know. I don't know at this point. And so I think the bottom line question is, were they a happy couple? Was there infidelity on either side? That's, I think, one of the important questions to ask right now. And I think if you can, if Paul has an alibi, then you don't need to ever talk about him again. But if he doesn't, then you have a problem. So just a final point, they the same age. I think she's 44. Sorry, he's 44, 45. She's 45. And then the question is, did somebody get the feeling that you too old for me? Or do you know what I'm saying? Like in the Chris Watts case, I think he was also a year younger than Shanann. Wasn't he 33 and Shanann was 34, something like that? In other words, you don't have some of you aren't going to like me saying this, but you don't have a situation that he's 45 and she's 35. And you might not like that statement, but it opens up the sort of situation of, did someone else come along who was regarded as an alternative? Someone who was younger, someone who was this, someone who was that, right? Someone who could have children, like you had in the Chris Watts case. I'd rather have children with this person, right? Could you have had a situation like that going on? And I think a very important point to make that's really obvious is these are both quite good-looking people. And so was someone attracted to Paul? Was someone attracted to NICOLA? Is that a starting point in this case? I don't think she would leave her dog. No, she wouldn't leave her dog. And that's it. Okay. So let's deal with a couple of questions, and then I'm going to say adios. Al Wilson says, I read her ex-husband is married to someone from where? What time was she reported missing? I think they noticed she was missing at 9:30. I think someone said she was reported missing at 10:50, but I haven't been able to confirm that. Evidence everything. Where's that? Did someone else pick up her daughters or usually pick them up as she dropped them off? Good question. I don't know the answer to that. Stella says, is there a mistress? The dog was running free, yeah. Liz says, is the perfect age for looking at younger women. Marcus says, what's the depth of the river? It's supposed to be 3 feet at the point where she was supposed to have fallen in. That's not deep. That's not deep at all. You know, she's probably 4 or 5 feet tall at least. Well, 5 foot tall at least. So if she stood in the water, she'd be 1 to 2 feet, to be basically waist deep, right? I have heard that there's a sister living at the house. I don't know what, I don't know for sure about that. Yeah, time will tell. Time will tell. Yeah, so some people are saying, let's think about the ex-husband. I suppose that's a potential next step. Is there a midlife crisis going on here? Was she having a midlife crisis? Yeah, it's true that she could have hit her head on the rocks, but bear in mind she's got to go through 3 feet of water, right? It seems a bit unlikely. I don't understand what you mean by play evidence everything. I don't know what that means. What's play evidence everything? They both worked from home. That is a recipe for conflict, I would say. Maybe not. Maybe you could say it's not a recipe for conflict. I mean, if they both worked from home, why was she not working from home then, right? It's a good question. Have there been any other missing persons in the vicinity before? When exactly was she reported missing? When was the dog found? I'm not sure. I think the dog was found at 9:33, and law enforcement was called at 10:50, but I'm not 100% sure. Let's have a look at the timeline. So here's the timeline. 8:43, she walked along the path. 8:50, somebody who knows Nicola, it's not like a stranger, saw her walking around the lower field with her dog. It would be interesting to know, was she on her phone? Their 2 dogs interacted briefly, and then the witness left the field via the river path. 3 minutes later, she sent an email to her boss. 8 minutes after that, she logged into a Teams call. 9:10, a witness, again, someone who knows Nicola, saw her on the upper field walking her dog. So this upper field. And they don't know exactly what time that was. At 9:30, the Teams call ended, but Nicola stayed logged on. This suggests at this time something was already happening. The Teams call ended, but Nicola stayed logged on. 5 minutes after that, Nicola's mobile phone and Willow were found at a bench. So it seems like if something happened here, it happened between around about 9:15 and let's say 9:20. It seems like that's a likely time when this could have happened. And then it doesn't say when they contacted law enforcement, but I think it was an hour and a half later. You can imagine there'd be some searching going on. Okay, we're about at the 3-hour mark. I think I'm gonna take a couple of questions and then I'm gonna say goodbye. Moonlight says a 16-year-old boy called Roger Jones drowned there 45 years ago. Check that. That's interesting. So there's a boy, Roger Jones. He disappeared at the same stretch of river. Exactly 45 years ago. Wow. Okay. Okay, and so that was following a motorcycle crash. So he crashed into, so that's totally different. He crashed while riding a motorcycle. I wouldn't be surprised if it was at night. There he is. Roger was a pupil at Fullwood High School. He was working to go to the college. I mean, there you go. Returned home one night as a passenger on a friend's motorbike when they crashed into a car on a narrow bridge. The bike rider was badly injured and was unable to tell them he had a passenger. The river conditions when Roger went missing were pretty similar. He was obviously swept over the weir and into the tidal part of the river. And then Don says he and his family didn't have to deal with social media trolls chiming in. So I must say, I find that really interesting because that means that someone was aware that other people would think this, that other people would think, well, you know what, someone drowned in the river right there. Well, so why didn't NICOLA, right? I find that really interesting. Here's another story. This is from the Express. Couple who lost son 45 years ago in same area know her pain. It was on a night in January, but totally different situation. He was riding a motorcycle and there was an injury, and so I guess they're trying to imply the same thing. She tripped, fell into the water, hit her head, and got swept away, and that's what happened to her, except that you're not going to find her. Interesting. Thanks for letting me know about that. Okay, I think that is it. Let's deal with the last couple of questions. I think it's a similar-ish situation to Kylie Rodney, that he was likely, well, it was at night. I think he was likely disoriented. I don't know whether he would have been under the influence, but he was likely disoriented and possibly injured as well. I agree that a coat probably would have floated for a while. I do find it interesting that the local culture is aware of this local incident, and so was someone playing with that idea, intentionally playing with that idea? And if someone was playing with that idea, you get this idea of staging. You get this idea of staging. You know, putting the phone there. There's like a sort of a decoy. What do I think happened to NICOLA? I think she's been the victim of foul play at this point. I just think that they would have found her by now, but I think this other case shows that it can be quite difficult to find someone. It's a good question. Did she actively participate in the team's call? It's a good question. I don't know. And that's also a very good point. Having it happen at the same time in January, you know, wasn't that meant to evoke that? it also makes you think, was this a tactical, calculated crime? Moonlight says the river has not been cleared yet. Adam says, thanks for covering this case. Hopefully you'll keep your eyes peeled. Yeah, so we'll see what happens. I hope you guys found this worthwhile. Yeah, I'll obviously look at what the latest developments are and let you know what they are. I'm going to be following this live with some analysis on Brian Coburg. I don't know if you guys have heard that he apparently was fired from his job as a teaching assistant. But I want to talk about that and the criminal psychology that has become a lot clearer now that we've gotten that information. Thanks everyone for being here. Welcome to the new subscribers. Thanks mods for doing such a great job. Mostly a really nice crowd of you. Really appreciate it. Thanks a lot for the super chats. And I'm going to take my dog now for a little walk, although it's late at night. I'm going to take Timmy for a little walk without a harness. Timmy, you want to go for a walk? Go for a walk. Huh? You can be a bit more excited than that. Go for a walk. Do you want to go for a walk? He doesn't look terribly excited, does he? Anyway, we are going to go for a quick walk, and then it's back to work for me. I'm really pleased the power didn't go out. It's really weird. Sometimes it goes out constantly, and then sometimes it doesn't go out, although it's scheduled. It actually hasn't gone out quite a few times when it was scheduled. So anyway, you benefited, I benefited, and so good for that. I hope you folks in the UK, maybe it's time to grab a pillow. It's past 11 o'clock, so I hope you found this worthwhile. Take care. For the folks in the States, your day is just starting. So I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you guys next time. All the best.